There we go. One Sunday afternoon in the backyard. I think this was probably 1962 or 63. And these are three Native American boys who lived with us. And I'm running this movie twice because I have too much to say. Okay. That's Danny sitting on the hammock. And the other two boys are Gilbert and Steve. That's Steve closest to the camera. And the one further away is Gil. Now, eventually, Steve and Danny went back to the reservation. Now, the reservation from which they came is in southern Arizona. It was known back then in the 60s. It was known as the Papago Reservation, and they were Papago Indians. But their real name, their name they gave themselves was Tohono O'odham, and they're Native American people of the Sonoran Desert, residing primarily, I'm reading this off the internet, residing primarily in the U.S. state of Arizona and the Mexican state of Sonora. Tohono O'odham means desert people. That word was pronounced Papago by the Spanish and adopted by later English speakers. Well, a family in East Aurora, New York, my hometown. That's my grandfather, by the way. A family in East Aurora sponsored these three Native American boys and gave them jobs in East Aurora. And they needed a place to live. So their sponsors came to my dad because, as you can see in this old movie, oh, there's Grandpa. I'm older now than he was then, for Pete's sake. But this was just one Sunday afternoon in the backyard, and I went and grabbed the movie camera and shot these films. That's Danny there. And this family in East Aurora sponsored them, and they needed a place to live. Well, my dad had built an apartment, a really nice 2-bedroom apartment, over our garage, and in the back of the garage was my dad's workshop, where my dad and grandfather worked on furniture. Well, a young couple came and wanted to rent the apartment, but my dad was already considering renting it to these three Indian boys, or I should say Native Americans. That's the current term. That's Steve and Gil and our German Shepherd, whose name was Duke. So they were just messing around with their guitars this afternoon. Well, this young married couple, came to my dad and wanted to rent the apartment. Real nice apartment. And my dad was considering renting it to these boys. And at one point, the lady said, "Well, you're not going to rent it to those Indians, are you?" In a rather disparaging tone. And that did it for my dad. He said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am." There's a group picture. That's my mother with the camera. Those two girls are from our church. That's how these three guys, wonderful friends really, came to rent our apartment. Well, eventually, Danny and Steve went back to the reservation. You can see the workshop, the cement blocks in the back, and above that was the apartment. They eventually went back. Oh, that's me when I was a very young man. They eventually went back to the reservation, but Gil stayed with my family. That was Gil playing the guitar. And he stayed with the family. And Gil lived with my parents from 1962 until he passed away in, I think, 2008 or 2009. And he and I were like brothers. I considered him my brother. So you'll see him in a lot of our home movies. There's my grandfather again. Love that man. You'll see him in a lot of our home movies. You'll see Gil, and I'll talk about Gil. That's the story of the Native Americans who lived with us. We had a wonderful backyard. That's the house in the background. That's Danny. They're just playing. I don't know what he was playing with there. And I left East Aurora in 1966 for California. I've been back occasionally. Betty Lou and I, my dear wife and I, have gone back to East Aurora, but no thanks for the snow. We'll do without that very well. There's Duke running. Come on, Duke. Let's go. Ooh. Duke and Danny. And there's Mom. And that's the story of our 3 Native American friends.